Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Hello everyone, welcome to this online course on the grammatical theory of Gurbani. This will be an introductory lesson. These lessons will require proficiency in Gurmukhi, despite being in English. And I'll try to compose it of short lessons so it's more easier to follow along and to learn from these videos. This is designed for Sikhs to deepen their connection with Gurbani, and if you have any questions with these lectures, feel free to contact me. I'd love to answer any questions. So let's just get into it, like straight into it. The type of things that we're going to be talking about, essentially. So here we can look at the line here. Puchaho brahme narada bed vyasa koe. Now if you notice here, the brahme is ending with a la, while narada is ending with a dalan, and while bias is also ending with a dalan. Now one may wonder why has a lam been used here, while here two dalams have been used, right, in these two instances, right? Like essentially, why aren't they sharing the same endings, or even bayed? Why is bayed not ending with anything, right? And so these are the things that we're going to engage about, and lots of the time we don't even think about these things, right? We often brush over them, thinking that it's whatever. But if you actually dig into it, you'll uncover things, right? So Brahme actually comes from Brahma, right? And this is in Punjabi grammar as well. This is not even in Gurbani. Whenever something ends with a kanna, and it's followed by a postposition, then the kanna becomes a la. This is something in Punjabi grammar that we use today. And so the reason why narada and biasa are ending in dalans is because they're the postpositional forms of the narada and bias, which actually don't end in a kanna, right? And so the postpositional form of narada and biasa would be narada biasa instead of narada and biase. And there are a lot more nuances to this. It's not as simple as this, but it's sort of to get a feel of what's going on, the things that we're going to be engaging with in these lessons. All right, and so you don't have to memorize this. This is just for you to get a little feel for what's going on. But for example here, narada biasa, it's actually optional, this postpositional form, right? If it was narada and biasa, that would have been fine too, but in order to increase the syllables for the poetic meter, the la has been added, right? And to also preserve the meaning at the same time. Here, bed is not ending with anything, not a la or a dalan, because it's in the genitive form, right? And so we can get, sort of interpret the sentence. Puchaho brahme narada. So basically, puchaho is to ask. It's the imperative form. Puchaho, go ask, right? You ask, the second person imperative. And ask to whom? Here the postposition, right? You'll not actually see the postposition. It's not written, but it's implied. So the postposition here is nu, right? To. Ask towards, right? Puchaho brahme narada bed vyasa koe, right? Brahme nu, narada nu, vyasa nu, right? So saying Pusho Brahme Narada, ask like Koi, Pusho Koi, ask whoever. Brahme Narada Bed Vyasa. You can ask this towards Brahma, you can ask this towards Narad, or you can ask this to Vyas of the Vedas. Yeah, Vedan Da Vyas, right? That Da is the genitive form. So this is just you don't need to learn these things just yet, but just sort of to give you a feel of what we're going to be dealing with. So what is grammar is a very important thing that we need to know. So there are two types of grammar. One is prescriptive, the other is descriptive. And I kept the Punjabi words here as well, Siddhantic and Virharik. And so prescriptive grammar are the rules. It's a theory. It's a science, right? Well, descriptive grammar is the actuality, right? The art, right? You can think of it that way, as prescriptive being the science and descriptive being the art, right? The science being the rules and the art being the application of those rules. Now, it's very important to understand this, however, is that grammar is something that when we talk about Gurbani grammar, we're specifically talking about prescriptive grammar, not necessarily descriptive grammar. And what is meant by that is that prescriptive grammar is never always 100% equivalent to descriptive grammar. That is to say that the rules that govern a language aren't always in practical use, right? The way that the language is practically spoken may not always align with the rules of that language. And why is this? Well, this is because grammar is something that is derived, right? People don't. Language is a very organic process, right? It's a result of evolution. It's not the idea that, like, for example, everyone's just speaking Latin, and then this guy just comes up with this big, giant grammar book saying, okay, we're all going to start speaking French now, here are the rules. And if you don't follow these rules, you're going to get sent to jail. Like, no, that's silly, right? So the reason I'm saying this is because you're going to encounter places in Gurbani that may not align with the theory. And they may be copyist errors in the printed Guru Granth Sahib, right? Copyist errors by writers of Gurbani, not necessarily the correct reading. But also, we should be very cautious of calling things incorrect just on the basis of grammar. Because grammar is dependent on language, language is not dependent on grammar, right? So that's very important to understand, right? Because when we'll talk about this later on in this lesson, but these rules, these grammatical rules, don't come out of a vacuum, right? There's a lot more nuances than you might think. It's not as simple as even though I showed this to you, as, oh, this has a dalan, so it's like this, or it has a dalan, so it's like this. It's not always the case like that, because they're etymologies, right? Different words come from different languages. Those languages have their own rules and own grammars, right? So there's lots of nuances that go into this. So we should be very cautious in our approach to calling certain readings incorrect solely on the basis of theoretical grammar. And I'm not saying that there aren't any mistakes. There are mistakes within the printed copies of Guru Granth Sahib. But how we should be dealing with those mistakes, or sometimes there might not even be mistakes, but we assume they are mistakes because they don't align with theory. So I think that's important to know. And now, so we'll talk about a little bit of the history of grammar, the importance of grammar. Lots of people have this misperception that grammar starts with Sahib Singh. Sahib Singh, for those of you who don't know, is the guy right here. He wrote Gurbani Vyakaran, which is the first comprehensive grammar on Guru Granth Sahib. Right? It's an amazing book, highly recommend to read. In fact, I might actually do a lesson on resources you can use, but I'll just be going through some resources through the lessons. But Gurbani grammar by Professor Sahib Singh, that was the first effort to make a sort of an organized grammar book, and that was done by Sahib Singh. So lots of people accuse him of starting this grammar stuff. But what's interesting is that actually, if you go to one of the oldest commentaries of Japji Sahib, by Kaviraj Santokh Singh. Santokh Singh is an amazing scholar. For those of you who don't know, and he composes this amazing commentary called the Gurbani, which is a commentary on Japji Sahib. And this is way before Sahib Singh and our modern understandings of Gurbani Vyakaran, but you do see him using grammar and trying to derive etymologies, and not just him, but other writers as well. And so we'll just go through some of these writers and the things that they say about grammar, and it sort of instills this idea of how important grammar was to these scholars. And so here, this is how the first thing he says in his commentary. So he talks about why the sat has a sihari here. And so he explains that Sanskriti mein takar ko yakar hota hai, which is basically essentially saying that the ya sound in Sanskrit, or the ya letter, becomes a sahari, right? And so he gives some examples ahead, but he's basically deriving the etymology from Sanskrit, right? He's saying originally the word was satya, and from that became satya. The ya became a sihari due to the change in language from Sanskrit to Pakha, or the vernacular. And for moving on, he also talks about Rajai. He does the meanings according to grammar, right? He specifically says grammar, actually. He says, Vyakana Reet Sopi Hota Hai. That this is what's going on in the grammar. And he compares it to the word Kasai, right? Kasi means to kill, right? So Kasai is the one who butchers. Kasi means to butcher, sorry. And Kasai is the one who butchers. So in that same way, Rajai comes from Raji. Raji means to be happy, or happiness. And Rajai means the one who is happy, then, right? And then here we have, he talks about Akhe Mangahe, Dehe Dehe. He talks about how the Haha Sihari at the end is showing the plural form, right? That they are asking, they are begging, they are pleading, right? The Akh De Hai, Mang De Hai, right? As opposed to Aklan or Mangdan, as opposed to the first person. And he's very tough on this as well, right? He says people who get this wrong are like the person who gets this wrong. This is a reply to the Anand Khan, who is another commentator who we'll talk about later a little bit, who also writes a commentary. So his commentary was a response to Anand Khan's. And Anand Khan makes this grammar mistake, right? He says that Akhe Mangahe means I ask and I beg, right? But he's saying, no, this is against grammar. And it's actually the plural third person. Akh De Mang De. And because he makes this mistake, he says, Aso arth kareo jaise pang khata hai. It's his literal words. He says, Anand Khan, who made this grammar mistake, he is commentating like he has consumed cannabis, right? That's how harsh he is. And that's how, and then you see like how important grammar really is. And so here also we see Akho, Tan Khan Ka Akho Karam. Akho is used here for the plural first person. Hum akh de hain, right? We are saying, I guess. And then he also derives etymology, right? He's saying to kaho comes from toko, to you, right? So here the ura is getting replaced with the haha onkar, and saying in that same way, akho, which is generally the normal use of the first person, a singular, is getting the ura there is getting replaced with the haha onkar. Now, Sadhu Anand Khan, this is the person who Santokh Singh is replying to. He also uses grammar in his commentary, right? He here for gava. He argues that gava doesn't mean to simply to sing, but it also can refer to saying, and he derives the root word saying that like ka, ga, ra, these tino tatun sabd ke arth mo hai, that they're derived from these three root words, I guess. Right, so even the earliest commentators are using grammar, is the point I'm trying to make. Here we have a Sarktavi. This is another text that is actually taught within more traditional institutes. And even in there, right, then this is like way before Sahib Singh as well. There's a sorta, there's a stanza saying Sabd Sastra ko tyag chahe adena par nigam sopa gint hai nag nis tam jal moch ramiyo. Oh, sorry, I read that as a dohra. Sabd Sastra ko tyag chahe adena par nigam sopa gint hai nag nis tam jal moch ramiyo. So he's saying that to abandon Sabasasra means Vyakaran, grammar. So if someone wants to abandon grammar and wishes to read Nigam, I guess you can say scriptures, Sopa Ginta Nag. It's like counting the feet of a snake. Nistam Jalmoche Ramyo. It's like wandering in the dark night within water. Right? It's a very illogical thing too, is the point it's trying to make. And so this is a very traditional text, and it's talking about the importance of grammar as well. Moving on, we have Pandit Kartar Singh Dakha, who also comes from a Nirmali background. And his syllabus for Gyani di Jamaat da Path Kram, and Mahagyani da Path Kram. So in the syllabus for becoming a Gyani or a Mahagyani as well, or a scholar, he puts Vyakarana importance, right? He makes it necessary that one is to learn grammar if they want to call themselves a Gyani. Yeah, Gyani Hazara Singh, who is Paivya Singh's maternal grandfather. And this is probably one of my favorite quotes ever. But essentially, it's in response to people who say that there is no grammar in Gurbani. And the response that he gives, the line he gives, is probably my favorite quote ever. It's a very beautiful line. I'll just read it out. He says, Maharaj di bani akas de tarya manyu theek aradred niyam vich chaldi hai. ਭਾਵੇਂ ਇੱਕ ਅਣਜਾਣ ਪੁਰਖ ਨੂੰ ਆਕਾਸ਼ ਤਾਰੇ ਖਿਲਰੀ ਹੋਈ ਰੇਤ ਤੋਂ ਕੁਝ ਵਧੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਸਦੇ. That the Bani of the Guru is kind of like the stars in the sky that are sort of contained within these rules, these laws that keep them in place in the sky. And in the same way, an idiot will look at these stars and say, oh, think of it as nothing more than just scattered sand, right? In that same way, an idiot will look at the star saying that's nothing more than just scattered sand. He draws that comparison to someone looking at Gurbani, right? Saying that these lans or dulans or onkars, these are nothing more than scattered sand, right? There's no law, there's no rules, there's no theory behind it. Right? Even though the stars do have rules, do have laws that govern them, although an idiot may not see it. And that's just an amazing and beautiful line, I think. And this is just fascinating. This comes from Gyani Hazara's Jat Sri Kivar Tika. And this, which I found from an article by Joginder Singh Vedanti, who's also another amazing scholar. But yes, that's just a fabulous quote, I think. Now, we're going to start going into a little bit on the importance of language in grammar. So when we look at Tera kita jato nahi, maino jog ki toi, we don't realize it, but there are like 3 different languages at play here, which is quite fascinating, right? So for example, tera is the possessive pronoun from classical Punjabi, right? If it was Prakrit or Bridge Pasha, more influence, then it would be tero. You see that a lot. And then kita is derived from the past tense participle a in classical Punjabi, right? Kind of how we say kareya. or padya, or padya, or right. For the past tense, we use anada, kanna, and so that's, or just a kanna here is being used in that same way. And we see jato and then kito. And so jato and kito are actually the same as kita. They mean the same thing. It's just that one is using the past tense participle of Prakrit and Pali, while one is using the past tense participle of classical Punjabi, derived from there, right? And this is how people spoke at the time, right? This is why Gurbani grammar is a very nuanced thing, right? We're seeing a bunch of different languages at play, so it's not as simple as the rules are always like this, right? We have to see how other languages use these rules and how they operate as well. And then we see kito i. I is a very unique thing, and it's found in Lendi, which is called a pronominal suffix. Pranav prashetar, or pranavi prashetar. And basically it's giving the meaning of the second person, right? Kito i is tu kareya, tu kita, right? You did, right? So this is just to show you how different languages operate within Gurbani. Now, some languages using Gurbani and how we can use that into our aid. For example, we have apapranch. Here you'll notice I've transliterated it into Gurmukhi, for those of you who cannot read Devanagari. This is from a grammar of apapranch by Madhusudhan Mishra. But what you'll notice here is kantu. There's an onkar here, right? And then in the plural, kant, there's no onkar. Then here, you have kante, kantehe, kantehe, kantaha, kantaha. And we have all these different variations of kant, and some of these you're going to find in Gurbani, especially these two. And now we learned that these grammatical rules did not come out of a vacuum, right? These saharis and onkars that are being used don't just come out of nowhere. These have been used, and people spoke like this. Right? This is another big thing, right? How we should be pronouncing Gurbani. Some people argue that we should not be pronouncing the onkar because it's grammatical, which is absolute bogus. It doesn't make any sense, right? Why? Because you can look at it in other languages. Kantu. It is getting in Devanagari they always pronounce the onkar. It doesn't matter whether it's grammatical or not. And so I guess the argument would be that Gurmukhi is different than Devanagari. But even that is a very weak argument, because we know that people spoke like this. Kantu. They would say the onkar, right? Or else it wouldn't be written. Because Devanagari is a phonetical alphabet. And Kantu is, and saying that we shouldn't pronouncing because it's grammatical doesn't make any sense. Because there are others, the horda is also used for grammatically, right? Kanto. That would also be grammatical, but there no one leaves out the horda. Why is that? Well, because it's easier to say the horda. Right? The entire idea of not pronouncing these onkars and saharis is because it's just too hard. That's the main reason. Which doesn't make any sense, right? You should always be... There's no language you speak without its grammar. It's a very rational thing, in my opinion. But yeah, no, it definitely gets clarified when we compare it to other languages, right? So if Devanagari is a phonetic alphabet, and it's spelled how people speak, or how it's pronounced, that would mean that the onkars were also pronounced at that time, right? Kanto. And so we should also be pronouncing these lagamatras, which is an important thing to note. But you see that these are being used, and if you look onto the verbs, you'll see almost all of these, except for maybe this one, in Gurbani, you'll find examples of these, right? Karaho. The karaho, this one right here, this is actually, we just went over this. In akaho, the plural first person. And here we have karaho for the imperative second person. We already went over that as well. Puchaho brahme, right? So it's very interesting. Karahe, we also went over this. Third person plural. Right here, akehe, mangehe. Right? So we can see that these things, these rules are not coming out of a vacuum. So the point is that when Guruji is compiling Guru Granth Sahib, it's not in like a vacuum, right? He's not bringing the Lakaris or whoever's writing Guru Granth Sahib a giant grammar book saying, okay, here are the rules that we're going to use. That's just not how it works. No. It's a result of an organic evolution, a process, right? A phenomenon called language that isn't as linear as we want to think, right? It's very nuanced, is the point I'm trying to get across. And then so lots of people say that Gurbani doesn't have grammar as well. But that's just not true. Because we do see in other languages that Gurbani, that they also use these grammatical inflections, right? It's not just happening in Gurbani. So that doesn't make any sense for Gurbani to not have it. Everything has a grammar. The only reason you're understanding what I'm saying right now is because of grammar. Believe it or not. Right? So we shouldn't be saying things that like Gurbani doesn't have a grammar, or Gurbani goes beyond grammar, because that's just not truthful. Right? Everything has a grammar, whether it's mental, theoretical, whatever. Right? The grammar is still there. So I'm just going to end this introductory lesson right here. This is just to dip your foot in the water, if you will. I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.